Okay, all right. Shabbat Shalom. We are back. We are going to be continuing on with our look at the book of Exodus. This week we are dealing with chapter 5 and about half of chapter 6. We want to be able to go through some things inside of those chapters. Of course, as always, we want to be able to look and see, what spiritual significances we're able to find within these verses. We want to always remember that, when we look in the Torah, we're able to see Yeshua. And so when we look and see these things that are going on that literally happen, these accounts that happen from a historical standpoint, we also understand that these things are giving us, pictures of our Savior, Yeshua. Okay, so we want to go ahead and get right into it. I think we're going to just go through this a little at a time. Let me pull up the scriptures over here. And let's see here. We put this here, I think. All right, we want to begin. Let's see here with, let's start with just looking at, let's just look at that first verse. What's that first verse here say?
And afterwards, Moshe and Aaron went in and said to Pharaoh, "Thus said Yahweh Elohim of Israel, let my people go so that they celebrate a festival to me in the wilderness."
Okay, so even when we start looking at this first verse over here, we see something that is very important. And we see her. First of all, let me get our tools out here. When we look and we see and we think about what's going on in terms of Moses going before Pharaoh and going with the words of the Most High, it's important to remember when we think about all of this, that this Exodus that is to come, that we know comes about, with the first Passover, this redemptive process that begins, with the Exodus coming out of Egypt. We can see even from the first time that Moses and Aaron go before the Pharaoh, that even within this first request here, we're able to see that there's something connected to the end of or after the the Exodus. He says over there, let my people go so that there's something that comes after leaving out from Egypt. Leaving out from Egypt is not like the end all and be all. That's not the goal, is not to leave Egypt, right? Because there's something that comes after. It seems the goal is to celebrate a festival to the Most High in the wilderness. That seems like what they need to be doing. So when we look over here and we think about the significance of the Exodus, what it represents, even from the first time that it's mentioned, we're able to see and understand that there is a thing that is connected with it, that's intrinsically connected to it, and more so, it seems it's the actual point of the leaving in the first place. And so when we look up until this point, we can see a few reasons that are given as to why the Most High is coming to help Israel, or what we'll call for today's purposes key components to deliverance. But let's look back. We want to look back. Let's go back to Exodus chapter 3 real quick and notice, because again, when we look over here, we see the reason for the people being let go over here is to celebrate a festival, to celebrate this Shabbat Shalom, to celebrate this festival with the Most High in the wilderness. So let's see what other reasons the Most High is given as reasons for this Exodus that is to come. This, yeah. Okay, so let's go back to chapter 3, verse 7 through 9. Let's read that real quick.
Yahweh said, I have indeed seen the oppression of my people who are in Mitzrayim, and have heard their cry because of their slave drivers. For I know their sorrows, and I have come down to deliver them from the hand of the Mizrahites, and to bring them up from the land to do good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to a place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. And now see the cry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Mizrahites oppressed them.
Okay, very good. So if we look over here at these verses over here, we see that the Most High, kind of among other things, has added the fact that he sees what's going on with Israel in Egypt, the oppression, right? With which the Mitzrahites oppressed them, as a reason for his coming. But just to say that would be a reason just because he sees the oppression, I think beyond that, if we go up where he begins in verse 7, where it says, I have indeed seen the oppression of my people, right? And so when we think about the reasoning behind the desire for the Most High to come and relieve Israel from the oppression. Seems right there. He's saying that these are my people. They actually belong to me. And so therefore, because of the fact that Israel is the people of the Most High, and he wants to correct the wrong that is the fact that they are owned by Pharaoh. They have been possessed by Egypt, right? They're not in their rightful place, right? So when we think about a reason for the Exodus, we think about like key components to deliverance. The first thing I really think about is the idea of fulfilling Israel's purpose and destiny, right? If they belong to the Most High, and then they're currently in the possession of someone other than, right? That's in order to cause Israel to get into their proper position and to fulfill the thing which they were created to do and be. The first thing that got to happen is they got to get out from under the possession of this ruler who is Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt. Right. And so we see that over and we look back with this idea of the Most High claiming Israel as his people. We look in the next chapter. Last week, we mentioned this over here in chapter 4, 22 and 23. What's those verses say there?
It says, "You shall say to Pharaoh, thus say Yahweh, Israel is my son, my firstborn. So I say to you, let my son go to serve me. But if you refuse to let him go, see, I am killing your son, your firstborn."
Okay, so we see over here kind of a continuation of the other point in terms of Israel being my people, being the people of the Most High. Over here, he kind of intensifies that and says, "This is my son, my firstborn." And so we had that point, the point of the idea of Israel being able to fulfill their purpose and destiny, getting into their rightful position. But then we also have this other thing that's added right in verse 23, to let my son go to serve me. To serve me. Here, let's look at this. Over here. To serve is abad. To work in any sense by implication, to serve, till, enslave. Interesting. Keep in bondage. Interesting. Be bondmen, bond service, compel, do, dress, ear, execute, husbandman. There's a lot of things, right? Look, worshiper. And so when we think about another one of the components of deliverance over here, besides the fact that we're talking about Israel fulfilling the purpose and destiny that they're supposed to be in terms of being the son, the firstborn of the Most High, another part of that is the idea of being able to worship the Most High, right? Being able to serve the Most High. And then the first thing you see over here is what? Work. But the thing that Pharaoh's doing with the people is causing them to work for him and serve him, right? And so we see this thing going on with Pharaoh in terms of his relationship with the people is about service, right? It's about abad. It's about bondage. It's about enslavement. Right? We're thinking about these things in terms of righteous relationship.
You got worshipers under here too.
And right, so it got worshiper under there as well. That's what we see at the bottom down here, right? And so all of these things over here is all things that's incorporated in what this is over here, abad. And so, but comparatively speaking, when we look at Pharaoh, he is the one that's causing Israel to work. He is the one that's causing Israel to serve him, where the Most High is wanting for Israel to serve the Most High. Hisky, hand me that little whiteboard. I need the eraser and those things, little markers too. We want to look at this word that's translated as serve in the ancient. Abad, which is an ain, which is an I. It is a bet, which is a tent plan, and a dalet, which is the door flap. Okay, so let's see here. We look at abad over here. Let's see. We have abad, which is a ain, which is an I. Ain. We have a bait, which is a tent floor plan that's like the blueprints to the house. And then we have the dalet, which is the tent door flap, right? And so ain, so we think about this word, this that's translated as serve. You kind of see the house. You see the house. You know the house. You know the house and the ins and outs of it, right? And so the ain, the see that you see with your eye, and you also are able to know things with your eye. And then the plan of the house, again, is this bait. So you see and know the plans of the house and also the movements and the ins and outs of the house, right? And so you have all of this knowledge, this connection, this relationship with this thing that you are serving, right? And so the Most High is trying to switch this up and cause the thing that Israel is serving to actually be him, right? And which again is the rightful place of Israel to be serving him, right? And to have this divine intimacy of the foundations and plans and the inner workings of the Most High, instead of having these this intimate relationship with the inner workings of all of the things that are pleasing to Pharaoh, right? And so again, when we look back in verse chapter 4, we see that, you know, this is a perfect example because we see both things in terms of the right relationship that the Most High wants to have with his son, his firstborn, who is Israel, and their purpose, which is to serve him. And then by the time we get back into chapter 5, we see that's exactly what he wants Moses and Aaron to go and say to Pharaoh. These is my people. These is my people, he says. Hold on, let me pull it up so you can see it here. He says, he didn't say let the people go or let Israel go. Let the sons of Jacob go, right? Let my people go so that they can come and worship me, so that they can go and celebrate this festival to me in the wilderness. And so again, this is a two-part situation. It's not just about the people getting out of Egypt, right? It's just not about them being freed from bondage. It's about getting out in this wilderness so that Israel is able to worship the Most High. And so when we think about you know, the spiritual significance of, you know, what we'll see with the Exodus from Egypt, remembering that this is like the first step of a multi-stepped process. It's not just about whatever it is that happens with the Exodus. Because even when, again, we look at this first verse, this is showing us that there's something that's coming after that's seemingly even more important than what we have over here. And so when we think about this again, when we're looking for Yeshua over here, when we think about what it is Yeshua represents in terms of the Exodus from our Egypt, you know, when we are able to turn from sin, right? And when we're able to say goodbye to our old master, the flesh, right? When we think about Yeshua's part in that situation, we think about his death, burial, and resurrection. If we just stop right there at his death, burial, and resurrection, we don't have all of the things that we need to move forward, because he came, lived, and died and resurrected so that we could receive the Ruach HaKodesh. So we're able to have that necessary component for worship. Let's look at let me see what I said. We were just looking at this the other day. What? We were just looking at this the other day.
Data.
I forgot to put the music and see if I can hear it and hear it. So
Look in John chapter 7. Let's see. No, it's chapter 5. Right? Yes. Yochanan. Okay, what do we have? Let's see. Oh, my fault. It's not 5, it's 4. Four and 23 and 24.
But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father also does seek such to worship him. Elohim is spirit, and those who worship him need to worship in spirit and truth.
Okay, so we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but when we look over here at the situation that's going on with Egypt, with Israel in Egypt, and seeing how the Most High is saying for Moses to say to Pharaoh to let my people go so that they can worship me. And we think about what this kind of the principles that we learn from this in terms of pointing towards Yeshua. When we think about the Exodus from Egypt and what that represents with Yeshua, the fact that leaving out from Egypt, the Exodus from Egypt is the beginning of something that needs to happen. In fact, it's the purpose of its happening, right? Because he wants to be able to worship with his people, Israel. But in order to be able to do that, it says over here, when we look in John, if Elohim is spirit, and those who worship him need to worship him in spirit and truth. And so when we think about, again, thinking about Yeshua, who died, yes, he died for our sins, right? So that we can be reconciled back to the Father. He was resurrected, right, as the first fruits of those that were to be resurrected. But if he never sends us his Ruach HaKodesh, how are we able to fulfill this over here? This John 4 and 24, if we don't have that spirit on the inside of us. If we never receive his spirit, how do we get this part over here? Romans 8 and 14. What's that say?
For as many as love led by the spirit of Elohim, those are the sons of Elohim.
How do we even get to the place of being sons of Elohim if we don't have the spirit of Elohim, the spirit of Elohim, who is spirit? Verse 9. What's verse 9 say?
But you are not in the flesh, but in the spirit, if indeed the spirit of Elohim dwells in you. And if anyone does not have the spirit of Messiah, this one is not his.
This one is not his if he don't have the Ruach HaKodesh. And so we see over here, when we think about the thing that Yeshua does for us, yes, he died for us. Yes, he was resurrected on the third day for us. But the thing that he was trying to do was do all of that first, so that he could go back to the Father and send back his Ruach to dwell inside of his people. And so again, when we see the picture, which is back in Exodus, of the fact that the Most High told to Aaron and Moses to go tell Pharaoh, let my people go, one, so that they could worship me. And then we think about over and the, from a spiritual perspective, what that represents in terms of that process of salvation and redemption that we see through Yeshua has to happen first, but then all of that so that the Ruach can come and dwell in his people so that we can be properly joined back to the Father. And so again, when we look back at the Torah and we see the types and the shadows, we're able to, just like we see these processes going on in the so-called Old Testament, when those things are fulfilled from a spiritual standpoint, they still go along those same lines. We're able to see the connections between the so-called old and the so-called new. Okay, so let's look at verse number 2. Hold on. Let's look at let's look at 2 through 5. Let me pull that up here. 5, 2 down through 5.
And Pharaoh said, who is Yahweh, that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know Yahweh, nor am I going to let Israel go. And they said, Elohim, the Elohim of the Hebrews, has met with us. Please let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and slaughter to Yahweh Elohim, lest he fall upon us with pestilence and with the sword. But the sovereign of Israel said to them, Moshe and Aaron, why do you take the people from their work? Get back to your burdens. And Pharaoh said, see, the people of the land are many now, and you make them cease from their burdens.
Okay, very good. So let's look at first. Pharaoh says, in verse 4, why do you take the people from their work? Why do you take the people from their work? That word over there, let's see, that's verse 4. The King James says, wherefore do you, Moses and Aaron, let the people from their works? That word is para, which means to loosen, to expose, to loosen or expose. I thought this was interesting. If you look at this in the ancient para, the idea of this word meaning to loosen or expose. You have the pay, which is, let's see, you have the pay here, which in the ancient is a open mouth. And then resh, which is the next letter there, which is a man's head. And then the ein, which is the eye. And so when you think about what's going on where the Aaron and Moses going before Pharaoh, talking about you people are the people of the Most High, and He wants for you to come over here and worship Him and quit messing around with this Pharaoh guy, right? Where he's opening the open mouth. He's opening the man's head. He's opening the man's head and his eye and his ability to see. Right? He's making the people be woke. Right? He's opening the man's eye. Instead of them working, right? They're being loosened in their mind. If you could think about that book, the Miseducation of the Negro, where it got that person on there with that like padlock around their head, right? But Pharaoh's like, you can't sit up here and be up here loosening the people, right? You sitting up here, I'm sitting up here trying to get them to work and to do all of these things, and you sitting up here trying to set them free in their minds, right? And so it's interesting that we see when we look over here at the gripe that that Pharaoh even has about this, the thing that he brings up when he says to them, why do you take the people from their work? But it helps us again to understand when we don't get what he's saying over there when we look at it like that. But when we think about the idea of loosening these people from this bondage, right? Because again, remember, the Most High wants for these people to stop working for Pharaoh and start working for him. Stop serving Pharaoh and start serving him, right? Stop thinking that this guy over here is the one who is the controller of you, and start thinking about the fact that the Most High, am the one who is the controller of you. And but that's the thing that Pharaoh's thinking about. Wait a second, he said. Wait a second. These people, you trying to keep these people from working for me. you trying to keep these people from doing all this stuff that I need for them to do for me. And he's like, nah, this is, it's not gonna be this, right?
It's almost like he believes he owns them.
Well, he does own them though, and so he got these people coming over talking about they're my people. Meanwhile, Pharaoh knows that they're his people, right? And so this is a huge problem. But I'm saying, like, got me a paper towel. The main part of the problem is this whole idea of this working thing. Like, you coming over here is stopping these people from working for me.
You're distracted.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep on going. Yes. Let's keep on going down. Let's read down to 23. Let me pull this up over here. We stopped at pick up at we pick up at 6.
In the same day, Pharaoh commanded the slave drivers of the people and their foremen, saying, "You no longer," I said, "you are no longer to give the people straw to make bricks as before. Let them go and gather straw for themselves, and lay on them the required amount of bricks which they made before. Do not diminish it, for they are idle. That is why they cry out, saying, 'Let us go and slaughter to our Elohim.' Let more work be laid on the men, so that they labor in it. And pay no attention to the words of falsehood." And the slave drivers of the people and their foreman went out and spoke to the people, saying, "Thus saith Pharaoh, I do not give you straw. Go take straw for yourselves wherever you find it. For your work shall not be diminished." And the people were scattered in all the land of Mizraim to gather stubble for straw. And the slave drivers were hurrying them on, saying, "Fulfill your actions, your daily matters, as when there was straw." Also, the foremen of the children of Israel, whom Pharaoh's slave drivers had set over them, were stuck and were asked, "Why have you not fulfilled your law in making bricks both yesterday and today as before?" And the foreman of the children of Israel came and cried out to Pharaoh, saying, "Why do you treat your servants this way? There is no straw given to your servants. And they say to us, 'Make bricks.' And see, your servants are struck, but your own people are at fault." But he said, "You are idle, you are idle. This is why you say, 'Let us go and slaughter to Yahweh.'" So now go.
Hold on. Okay, hold on. Stop right there. So this this is crazy. So Pharaoh, because of what's going on with Moses and Aaron through the instructions from the Almighty in terms of saying, "Go and let my people go so that they can worship me," he sit up there and say, "I'm not going to let you go, and now I'm going to make you work harder." But just specifically, I want to talk about those other things too, but just over here, 16, your servants are struck, but your own people are at fault. You sitting up here beating the people because of a condition that you created and their inability to meet the requirements when you fix the game in the first place. This is not funny.
It's like the Pharaoh made an impossible situation for them, and they're getting beat
And they're being punished
because they can't complete this mission impossible.
Yes,
Bird.
that he created.
Mm-hmm.
So the people are being punished because of the fact that they've been put in this position at no fault of their own. I just wasn't able to just keep on reading that without stopping right there when you just think about our current situation where you have this people who is over another people and want to sit up and blame the people for the condition that the people are in when they created the condition. Just like in the Bible. Okay, go ahead. What verse was you on? What was you?
I was at 18.
Okay, keep going right
It says, "So now go work, and straw is not given to you, but deliver the amount of bricks." And the foreman of the children of Israel saw that they were in trouble after it was said, "You are not to diminish your daily amount of bricks." And when they came out from Pharaoh, they met Moshe, and Aaron, who stood there and met them. You want me to read the whole thing or just start?
Stop at 23.
Okay.
Yeah, the whole chapter.
And they said to them, "Let Yahweh look on you and judge, because you have made us loathsome in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his servants, to give a sword in their hand to kill us." And Moshe returned to Yahweh and said, "Yahweh, why have you done evil to this people? Why did you send me? For ever since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people, and you have not delivered your people at all."
Okay, so let's go back up. There's a lot to think about over here. When we look over here, I want to go back to, let's see. We look at verse 8. He said, these people, they out here idle. Otherwise, they wouldn't be crying out, talking about, let my people go and slaughter to our Elohim. What that word mean, idle? They got too much time on their hands. That's why they thinking about being free.
Yeah, it's like, y'all don't got enough burden on your mind to do. Yeah, y'all got time to think about something else. Yeah, that's real, man.
That's crazy,
That's
right?
like today. With distraction, working, worrying about.
Yeah, so when we look over here, look, he says this word idle is a word that is rafa, which means to slacken. To slacken. To slack, to be slothful is part of that word there. And so again, when we see the most not the Most High, but Pharaoh, his response is, as you say, these people got too much time on their hands. If they was working harder, then they won't have time to think about this stuff that's being opened up to them, right? How Moses is taking them from their work. And so when we look over here, we see these interactions between these officers, which were probably when we have these slave drivers or taskmasters and these foremen, or officers, going on, where the slave drivers probably were the Egyptians, and the foremen were probably, Israelites, who were, used, by the slave drivers as, the bosses or what have you. And so when we look over here at what's going on with Pharaoh, we see again, all he wants to do is just to increase the work of the people. He wants to increase the work of the people so that they don't have this idle time to even think about. He don't want them to even have time to think about, going and being with some other God. And it's interesting. So the way in which that's done, like he could have just gave them more work to do, but it's interesting that it seems as if there was an extra component added to the work, to the more work. Right? They had more work to do with an extra component added to it. And I think about if you do a thing over and over again, it gets to a point, it can get to a point where it's just kind of just muscle memory. You're doing it, you're not even thinking about it. So you could sit there and do the work potentially, and then still you could still have a mind of, you could be thinking about other things at the same time because you're just doing this thing. You're just sitting there. I don't know how they made bricks or whatever. I'm just thinking that maybe they was mashing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's just this mindless thing. But now you got to go get the materials. You got this added component where you got to figure out where the stuff is at and get it. Maybe you got to process it to get to the state that it could be used in. You got this extra things now. So it's not just, he didn't just say, give me more bricks, but now you got to worry about more things that's involved in even making the bricks in the first place. Right? Trying to take their minds out of the thing. Trying to, make it so that the people wasn't able to even think about freedom or any other way for that matter. The only thing that he wants for these people to sit up here and think about is work for the man. And so when we look over here and look at this and we see what's going on, it's interesting that we see, Pharaoh, his response is to distract the people from, this thing that's going on, right? To occupy both the mind and the body of the people so that they're not able to even think about, this Hebrew God, this thing that that Moses and Aaron are bringing about. And in doing that, again, he's expressing his dominance over the people, right? You want to sit up here and have these people think about freedom and leaving away from the work that I got for them to do? No. I'm the master of these people, and here's how you gonna see that I am, right? And so also, as it's being done now, look at the response that Moshe has as a result of this, right? We see Moses, he said, why have you done evil to this people? Why did you even send me? He says, Moshe says. And so all of this stuff that's going on, we see is not only having an effect on the people because of course they're being punished for it, but now Moses, as he's going through all this stuff, not thinking about it from the right perspective, now he's looking at this and he's like, I done sat up here, you sat up here and maybe make it worse for them. No. So when we see with Moses, what he's doing, he's actually being affected by the dominance of Pharaoh over here. By he's trying to get the people distracted and cause the people to have their minds and bodies be working for him and moving towards his goal. But he's also doing the same thing to Moses in his mind, because now he's sitting up here acting like his plan is being thwarted, right? Like he's looking at the situation and it looks like Pharaoh's the one that's in control of the situation. His mind is Moses' mind is being affected by this whole situation. And so when we look at this, we see Moses is looking at what's actually physically going on and not thinking about the spiritual aspect of the situation. First of all, the Most High said that this was how it was going to be in the first place. He said, I'm going to send you over there. You're going to say, let my people go. And he's not going to let them go. Mm-hmm. And so when we look over here, it's almost as if like Moses must have forgot that part, because his response makes it seem as if he feels like Pharaoh's winning the game. Like Pharaoh's on top. Why would you have me sit up here and do this? Now look.
And I think that's why the Most High hardened Pharaoh's heart, because he had to dismantle Pharaoh, because Pharaoh, in the eyes of the people, they were looking at him like greater than the Most High.
Yeah.
So he had to make an open display of his authority, his power on Pharaoh, to show the people like, no, I'm the one. You ain't got to fear him, fear me. And I believe that's why he had a heart so that the people can see, who they serve.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. We'll definitely see the way that the Most High topples Pharaoh and causes him to be made low, and all of his gods and all the things that they love to be made low. We definitely see that. But over here, at this point in the game, if we was looking at this and this is like a basketball game, Pharaoh, he's up, right? We waiting for the comeback. Like we sitting there with our little rally hats on, and we trying to figure out how the home team is going to come back. This is a low point over here. And he really is expressing his dominance over the situation, even to the point where Moses again is questioning the Most High. He said, you have not delivered your people at all. Let's see. Oh, it says the same. This is the same thing in the KJV. So again, when we look at this, when we think about again what's going on, the fact that again from a spiritual perspective, thinking about Moses and his inability to look at the situation from a spiritual perspective and only see what he can see. right? And the thing that he was trying to do for the people seems like that same thing needs to be done for his own self, right? When we was looking at this idea of opening the mind, opening the man's eye, opening the man's eye, right? Moses' eye need to be open right now. The way he's thinking about this, looking at the situation, and not thinking about what the Most High said he was going to do. Okay, so let's keep on going over here. Let's look at these. I want to, let's see, we might as well read, let's see. We might as well just read the next 13 verses of the next chapter and just deal with those like that. So let's look at chapter 6 and just read from 1 to 13. We'll talk about
Yahweh said
that.
to Moshe, and I'll see what I do to Pharaoh, but with a strong hand he is going to let them go, and with a strong hand he is going to drive them out of his land. And Elohim spoke to Moshe and said to him, I am Yahweh. I appeared to Abraham, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov as El Shaddai, and by my name, Yahweh. What was I not known to them? And I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land of their sojournings, in which they have sojourned. And I have also heard the groaning of the children of Israel, who the Mezerites are enslaving. And I have remembered my covenant. Say therefore to the children of Israel, I am Yahweh, and I shall bring you out from under the burdens of the Mizrahites, and shall deliver you from their enslavings, and shall redeem you with an outstretched arm, and with great judgments, and shall take you as my people, and I shall be your Elohim, and you shall know that I am Yahweh your Elohim, who is bringing you out from under the burdens of the Mizrahites. And I shall bring you into the land which I swore to give to Abraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov, to give to you as an inheritance. I am Yahweh. And Moshe spoke thus to the children of Israel, but they did not listen to Moshe because of shortness of spirit and from hard slavery. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, go in, speak to Pharaoh, sovereign of Mizraim, to let the children of Israel go out of his land. And Moshe spoke before Yahweh, saying, the children of Israel have not listened to me, and will not. And why would Pharaoh listen to me? For I am of uncircumcised lips. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe and to Aaron, and gave them a command for the children of Israel, and for Pharaoh, sovereign of Mizraim, to bring the children of Israel out of the land of Mizraim.
Okay. All right, let's go back up here to the top and think about some of these things that we see over here. We look, let us look at verse 3, where he says, and I appeared to Abraham, to Yitzhak, and to Yaakov as El Shaddai, and by my name Yahweh was I not known to them. So when we look at this, if you just looked at that, it seems as if he's saying that the forefathers didn't ever call on the name of Yahweh. They just called They just call him as El Shaddai because it says, that's what it says. I appeared to them as El Shaddai by my name. Yahweh was I not known to them. And so I wanted to think about the fact that, first of all, when we look back in chapter 3, when we talked about chapter 3, where it said, when Moses said, who shall I say sent me? And then he said, I am that I am. Moreover, Yahweh is my name. This is my memorial forever for all generations. Nowhere in that situation did he say El Shaddai. And so if we think about this Exodus chapter 6, verse 3 verse as being something that we would mean that he's literally saying they only knew El Shaddai and they didn't know Yahweh. Why would, when Moses is told by the Most High the name to give to the people, would it be something that was foreign to them that they didn't already know about? It seemed as if it would be the opposite. I'm going to tell you about this name that you're familiar with, and then you say, "Oh yeah, oh that's who." Okay, yeah, then we'll definitely follow that. I feel like the opposite result will happen if I'm telling you of this name that you don't know of already. And in addition to that, El Shaddai is not even on the in chapter 3 and 14 and 15. So I think that when we look at Exodus chapter 6 and verse 3, then it's not about what the people literally were saying as the name, but more so the attributes that go along with the name is what is being referred to. The things that are behind the name is what is being referenced over here in Exodus chapter 6 and verse 3. And I'm saying that because if we go back, because if we just think about Exodus chapter 6 and verse 3 from a literal standpoint, they didn't know him as Yahweh, they only knew him as El Shaddai. Then that means if we go back, we're not going to see Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob they're not going to be calling on the name of Yahweh. But if we look back in Genesis chapter 12, and 8, I mean, among other verses, there's other verses that you could go to. But what's verse 8 say right there?
This is from there he moved to the mountain east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent in Bethel on the west of Ai, on the east, and he built there a slaughter place to Yahweh and called on the name of Yahweh.
Okay, so over there it says that he called on the name of Yahweh. But I guess maybe you could say, well, the name of Yahweh that he knew was El Shaddai, so that's what he called him. I don't think I would say that, but somebody might say that.
Or the writers just
put that in there, yeah. But we know that the name of Yahweh that he knew was El Shaddai. Somebody could say that. All right. Well, I thought somebody might say that. Somebody might say that. So that's why I want to look at also 13 and 4. What's that say?
It says, to the place of the slaughter place which he had made at first, and Abram called on the name of Yahweh.
All right. So that same person might use that same argument right there. What's 28 and 13 say?
It says, and see, Yahweh stood above it and said, I am Yahweh Elohim of Abraham, your father, and the Elohim of Yitzchak, of the land of which you are lying. I give it to you and your seed.
Okay, so if we look over here at Genesis 28 and 13, we see this is Jacob, and it says that Yahweh said, I am Yahweh, Elohim of Abraham, your father, and the Elohim of Yitzchak. So we can see over here that that Yahweh told Jacob, he said what his name was right over it. Where it's less obscure in the other places where you think about, it says that he called on the name of Yahweh, but if he didn't know the name of Yahweh as Yahweh, he could have been saying El Shaddai. But over here, it didn't say that Yahweh said that I am El Shaddai. He said, I am Yahweh Elohim. Right. So we look over here, it seems as if Jacob is knowing. And then also you can assume that because it's like this, whenever he's saying that I am Yahweh Elohim of Abraham, it's the same idea as before when you think about Exodus chapter 3 and 15, where he's telling him a name that he's familiar with, not something that he's not familiar with. So he's saying, I am Yahweh Elohim of your father. That's the one who is dealing with you in this dream. And so let's see, what does 16 say?
And Yaakov awoke from his sleep and said, truly, Yahweh is in this place, and I did not know it.
Okay, so this is slightly different from we look and see where it is saying that he called on the name of Yahweh, because that is kind of a little obscure, where it potentially could be some other thing that he called on, but whatever the name of Yahweh was to him. But over here now it's saying that he literally said Yahweh right there. And so again, let's see. We'll just oh, what? Okay, what does 20 and 21 say right there?
And Yaakov made a vow, saying, seeing Elohim is with me, and he has kept me in this way that I am going, and has given me bread to eat and a garment to put on when I return to my father's house in peace, and Yahweh has been my Elohim.
Okay, very good. And so I think that when we look at these verses over here, it helps us to understand that it wasn't as if Exodus chapter 6 and 3 is saying that they did not know of the name Yahweh, and that they only knew of the name El Shaddai. because they clearly knew the name of Yahweh based on these verses that we looked at over here. But again, when we look at what's going on in Exodus chapter 6 and verse 3, I would say that what is happening over here is what we're talking about is the character that is behind the character qualities that are behind the name, the intimacy level that the forefathers had with the Most High, was at a certain degree, and what it's about to be on is about to be to a greater degree. Again, we're talking about really the birth of Israel as a nation. They had things that they did that they understood to be things that were favorable towards the Most High. But something that never happened before is going to happen in about 14 chapters from now when the Torah comes down. And so when we look at this verse over here, I think it's clearly dealing with the quality of the relationship being intensified with the people Israel moving forward, and that's the point of what verse 3 is saying, not the fact that they didn't literally know the name, because it seems as if they did based on those verses that we looked at over there. Is that something that's getting ready to happen with the people of Israel is going to be more intimate, more intense than it's ever been with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They dealt with the Most High to a certain degree. But now, what I'm getting ready to do with the people now is about to be to a degree that they never was on this level. And then we can also see when we think about the next verse where he says, and I also established my covenant with them to give them this land. The people that he's talking about who are about to be on this more intimate level with the Most High are the ones who are going to reap the benefits of the things that was promised back to the forefathers. So when we think about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they are the ones where the Most High was saying, your children is the ones that's going to go over here and have this land. But now we're at the part with the children. And so again, looking at this verse over here, it's about the quality of the relationship, right? And so moving down, we see in chapter 6, verse 6, we see something that we always talk about during Passover is the 4 levels or the 4 levels of redemption, where he says, say therefore the children of Israel, I am Yahweh, I shall bring you out, I shall deliver you from their enslaving, I shall redeem you with an outstretched arm and great judgments, and shall take you as my people. And so when we think about what is being said over here in these two verses over here, um, just like just like when we think about what we just talked about in terms of verse 3, where this is talking about really levels of the relationship being intensified. We look at chapter 6, verse 6 and 7, we can think about the different levels upon which the Most High is going to redeem his people. And he could have said, one of these things, but instead he said all four of these things, right? He gives you what he's going to do, and he layers the situation. And so we're able to see within that, starting with what he's going to do, where it says, I shall bring you out from under the burdens. Let's look at that. Bring. Is this word here, yatsah, which is to go, to bring out. And great variety applications, literally, figuratively, direct, all of that. To bear out, begotten, break out, bring forth, carry out, come, draw forth, escape. When we think about what this is saying over here, to bring you out from under the burdens of the Mitzrites, we think about that really from the idea of that being the thing that's exemplifying the physical removal of the people, the literal fact that they're going from being in Egypt to not being in Egypt. They're being brought out, right? The literal physical idea of being physically removed from the burdens, right? They was over there, and now they're not over there, right? He's going to take the people physically out. They're no longer going to be there. And so that word over here, let me look at this in the ancient. That word, yatsah, is a yod, a tzadi, and an aleph. So it's a yod, a tzadi, and an aleph. And so the word yatsah, the modern Hebrew looks like that, but then the ancient is an arm, is an arm and a hand, the arm and a hand, and then this is both a man on his side, man laying down on his side. It's also the path and the destination, right? The path is this little line thing over here, and then this is the spot where you're going, the destination. And then also you have the aleph, which is the ox's head, which gives you the idea again of strength. And so the arm that brings you along the path to the destination with strength, right? That arm the arm that brings you down the path to the destination with strength. That's what Yatsah means, right? And so again, we think about that from the idea of the physical removal of the people. So he physically took Israel out with a strong arm. That's what he said he was going to do. At this point, it's just what he said he was going to do. With a mighty, with an outstretched arm, even just like the word Yatsah is the outstretched arm, is the arm with the hand reaching down, right? And he takes them from the place and moved them, right? So this represents that physical aspect of redemption, right? And the fact that he was going to literally and physically take them away. And so again, we think about from a spiritual perspective, right? Thinking about Yeshua again. When we look at this part of the situation, we think about our redemption. We are in the land of our captivity, right? We haven't been physically moved. We're still over here, right? But unlike our ancestors, this reality doesn't take away from our redemption, right? So let's look over at Ephesians, because we can think about the fact that Israel, who was physically removed from Egypt, and yet and still they still, there was times, well, they always were complaining as while they was in the wilderness, and at some points wanting to go back, right? So they had that physical redemption where they were physically moved from the place, yet there was still something that they was attached to. And so now we have a situation where through Yeshua we have redemption, right? But we're the opposite is true. We've been redeemed by Yeshua, but we're physically in captivity. And so Ephesians 2, 5 and 6. What's that? Oh, wait a second. Let's say 4, 5, and 6. Let me pull this up. Ephesians 2, verse 4, 5, and 6.
But Elohim, who is rich in compassion because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in trespasses, made us alive together with Messiah. By favor, you have been saved, and raised us up together and made us sit together in the heavenlies with Messiah, Yeshua Messiah.
Okay, so if we look at this these verses over here, where it says where he, because of the love that he had for us, we were dead in trespasses. That's in respect of our previous condition prior to accepting Yeshua as our Messiah. Now currently has made us alive together with Messiah. By favor, you have been saved. That's used in the past tense. And raised us up together and made us to sit together in in the heavenlies. I'm thinking about King James as heavenly places, but here it says to made us sit together in the heavenlies in Messiah. Except last time I checked, I'm sitting on Anthony Street, right? And so when we look at this over here, he's talking about something that will be as if it is right now. Right? He's speaking of this thing that didn't literally happen, but for all intents and purposes, it literally happened already. Right? When we think about Messiah, who the scripture talks about him being slain from the foundation of the earth. And so, from a spiritual perspective, before it physically happened, from a spiritual perspective, it was already done. And so, the same situation is that as what we see over here with this in terms of in Messiah. When we're in Messiah, our future destination is sure when we're in Messiah right now, because he said right here, he raised us up like something he did already together and made us sit together in the heavenlies with Messiah. Something that didn't physically happen, but in the spiritual realm,
it's already done.
And so another example of that would be in Genesis 17. Genesis 17, 4 through 11.
Says, as for me, look, my covenant is with you, and you shall become a father of many nations.
4 through 11.
Okay. And no longer is your name called Abraham, but your name shall be Abraham, because I shall make you the father of many nations, and I shall make you exceedingly fruitful and make nations of you, and sovereign shall come from you. And I shall establish my covenant between you and your seed, me and you, and your seed after you and their generations, for everlasting covenant to be Elohim to you and your seed after you. And I shall give to you and your seed after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan, as an everlasting possession, and I shall be their Elohim. And Elohim said to Abraham, as for you, guard my covenant, you and your seed after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall guard between me and you, and your seed after you. Every male child among you is to be circumcised, and you shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall become a sign of the covenant between me and you.
Okay, so this covenant that the Most High made with Abraham, first it said, and Elohim said to Abraham, as for you, as for you, guard my covenant. Shall give you seed. Oh, Elohim said, as for you, guard my covenant, you and your seed after you throughout your generations. Right? This covenant of circumcision between the Most High and Abraham. But when we look over here, we see that Abraham, who has his name changed over here with this covenant that the Most High made with Abraham, he said, now you are the father of many nations. Right now, you're the father of many nations. You shall become, you're going to become the father of many nations. And you shall no longer be called exalted father, but your name shall be Father of many nations. And so from that point forward, he dealt with Abraham, as the father of many nations, even though at this point he don't even have a son to circumcise, right? Let alone be a father of many nations. And so, but this covenant that was being established was this everlasting covenant that he was making with Abraham and his seed that didn't even exist yet. And so again, we see this example of the Most High making this thing be, calling this thing into existence that wasn't, but that will be. And so it was just as good as if it was. Again, we think about all the things that came after Abraham in terms of Isaac and Jacob and Israel, subsequently after that, is all because of the covenant that the Most High made with Abraham, right? The Most High keeping his part of the bargain, right? We have an example of the people of Israel going through the scriptures and all of the folly that goes along with it. But because of the fact that the Most High made this everlasting covenant with Abraham, he makes a way for Israel in spite of Israel. And so again,
Thank you.
right. So again, we see this this thing where the Most High is causing for from a spiritual perspective, the realities don't always line up. It's not based on what we can actually see at the, at any given moment. What it's actually about is what the Most High had declared to be, not dealing with its, with its physical manifestation. It's not the determining factor. In other words, I can't sit up here and say, or anybody from this point, if your shoe don't come until tomorrow, right? What about all the people that been dead already? We're not gonna say that those people wasn't redeemed because they didn't see him physically return. When we think about faith, again, faith is not about what you're able to physically see. And when we look at Moses over here, we see part of Moses's misstep is looking at what he could physically see. What he was able to physically see was Pharaoh expressing his dominance and him actually kind of losing heart. When we look at that last bit of chapter 5, where it said that where it said where did it say that the people was it said something about their weak spirits.
You said, what did you say? People with weak spirits?
Yeah. What verse was that? Because of their hard labor.
That's 6 and 9.
Oh, that was this chapter. What'd that say?
So Moshe spoke thus to the children of Israel, but they did not listen to Moshe because of his shortness of spirit and or their hard slavery.
Yeah. So their hard labor and their weak spirits. What did it say?
Shortness.
The shortness of spirit.
King James says the anguish of spirit.
The anguish of spirit, or short spirit, or weak spirit, caused them not to be able to accept what the Most High said was going to be, because all they was dealing with was what they could physically see. Where they was looking at their at the physicalness, and that's how they was able to understand the reality, which it makes sense. You base your reality really on what you can physically see. But the Most High over there is calling for them to ignore their physical reality and deal with what he said, which is totally different from physical reality, which is the difficult thing for you to sit up here and think about what you can literally see based on and weigh that against what you can't see. It's easier for me to say, well, this cup is sitting right here. I can look at it and touch it and feel it, as opposed to something that I'm supposed to be receiving, that was promised, but I haven't received it yet.
It's like us being here in the land of our captivity right now, waiting for Messiah to return. You know, you look at the situations going on instead of looking up to the heavens,
Right,
to where our hope lies.
Right. And so when we look at Moses, and even the people for that matter, where, they're looking at what they're able to see, and they're not able to accept what the Most High said based on what they're looking at, which goes against what they, what he sees, what he said. Romans chapter 4. Romans 4:17. Read 17 through 21.
It says, as it has been written, I have made you father of many nations in the presence of him whom he believed, the Elohim, who gives life to the dead, who calls that which does not exist as existing, who against all expectation did believe in expectation, so that we should become father of many nations, according to what was said, so shall your seed be. And not having grown weak in belief, he did not consider his own body already dead, being about 100 years old, in the deadness of Sarah's womb. He did not hesitate about the promise of Elohim through unbelief, but was strengthened in belief, giving esteem to Elohim, and being completely persuaded that what he had promised, he was also able to do.
Okay, very good. So when we look over here, where it's speaking about Abraham and the faith that Abraham possessed, where he was able to not be dependent on what he was able to physically see and even know as literal fact, where he had to deny actual facts that he was 100 years old and that his wife Sarah had this dead womb. I don't know why that's to say it so harshly. The deadness of Sarah's womb, right? Where it said he did not hesitate about the promise of Elohim through unbelief. And so again, when we think about again talking about redemption, we and physical redemption specifically, we can't look at the fact of and think that we kind of have this shortcoming because we don't have this physical aspect. Because again, we think about the physical aspect that Israel had, and when we look at these other parts, you know, they seem to have had the other parts. It seemed like they had all the parts. They had all the parts over there. But meanwhile, we still had a necessity for Messiah to come. When we look at what what Israel went through in the wilderness is just a picture of what was to come. And so when we look at the fact that they had the physical, mental, spiritual, and the actual redemption manifests in their situation, and you know, all the people, all intents and purposes, all the people who came out of Egypt didn't ever even make it to the promised land, and they had all the parts, right? And so, you know, we have to be able to think about what is the most important aspects, which when we look at the next part, go back to Exodus. The next part. So he said, I'll bring you out from under the bondage and deliver you from your enslaving. Right? You could think about when you read it, kind of, it's almost, I don't know what the difference is. I shall bring you out from under the burdens and shall deliver you from their enslaving. Well, the difference I would say is this next part is dealing with the mental aspect, which some of the people, which we'll see, some of the people didn't have that part. Some of the people was still slaves in their minds, right? Some of those people would have rather had still been back in Egypt, having already left, right? They was gone. He brought them out from under the burdens, but some of the people that was brought out from the burdens wasn't delivered from their enslaving. They were still slaves, right? They still had that mental part. So when we look at that part, not Saul, which means to snatch away, right? To deliver, to rescue, to preserve, to save. And when you think about the idea of this mental part, you know, it's a key component, which was probably the main problem. We can't say that it didn't exist for them, because there were those who were able to be delivered from the bondage. They was able to be delivered. I guess it was really only Joseph and Caleb. We just had those two individuals, right? But well, if Moses wouldn't have had done what he done, he you know, I mean, he wouldn't have been counted still. But you have examples of those who, were able to manifest the mental aspect of the redemption, where they understood. I mean, that was the main thing that you look at, that you look to when you see what the difference was between Joshua and Caleb. Was they looked at the reality of the people in the land. They saw the same thing that the other 10 spies saw, but they saw the Most High as being able to deliver them no matter what they was going to face. So it wasn't like they saw the people saw the same people, the same tyrants, the same everything, but their perception of reality was based on the fact that they was able to trust in the Most High to be able to get them through where it didn't matter what they was looking at. And so the ones who was sentenced to death in the wilderness was the same way as these people over here who are looking at this straw that they got to get, and these bricks, this brick quotas that they got to meet. They're looking at this thing, and Pharaoh's saying that he's not going to let us go, even though the Most High said that Pharaoh was going to say that he wasn't going to let them go, but then that he was going to let them go after the fact. They're only just looking at what they could see, and they're not thinking about what the Most High said, and that is a symptom of being enslaved, having your mind enslaved. They couldn't wrap their head around the idea of there being some other master other than Pharaoh, the one that they could look over there and see. When you talk about the power of one overcoming that of another, it's important. The most important part is that mental part of that. If I can control your mind, you'll never be free. You'll always be bound to the control that is exerted over you. You don't have to have chains on your feet. If I sit up here and tell you can't go but 10 miles over that way, as soon as you go 11, your mind's gonna just explode and it's gonna melt and you just gonna die. You're gonna stay in that 10-mile radius your whole life because you just been controlled. These people be doing mind control on us all the time. And you just got to do exactly whatever they say do. And you'll do it too. You'll do it. You'll be mad while you're doing it, but you still do it. Right? But when we think about what the Most High said he was going to do, part of what he said he was going to do for Israel was to have them be freed in their minds. And so how much more so do we think about what it is that Yeshua does? Because when we think about what it is that Yeshua did, it was pictured for us with Israel, but he does the same thing, but he does it like to a different degree. Right? And so how much more so do we think it is that Yeshua is able to deliver us from our enslaving? I'm saying that it's important if we think about this now. If we think about the single most problem that Israel faced was the fact that they was mentally enslaved still, even though they was free. That was their main problem. They were sitting up there complaining about things and wishing they was back over there. When they had this thing, I don't know what manna tastes like, but probably tastes like whatever you wanted it to taste like. Yeah, I mean, it was bread from heaven. The Most High has given you, he's providing for your every need. And yet the people are sitting up here wanting to have the thing that they was used to having, which was what they was having while they was enslaved, by the way. And they were desiring that. And so think about that now from a now perspective in terms of what Yeshua provides for us. You know, are we able to be content with what he provides for us, or do we long and desire that which we are familiar with, what we already know about, which, by the way, is the things that we received in our enslavement? The thing that holds us back is our inability to take the chains off of our brains. Now, if you're in bondage in your mind, but you are physically free, you're in bondage. And so when we think about what it is Yeshua has done, he does all of these things over here for us. And so when we look at Romans, look at Romans real quick. What does 1 and 2 say right there?
It says, I call upon you, therefore, brothers, through the compassion of Elohim, to present your bodies of living offering, set apart, well pleasing to Elohim, your reasonable worship. Do not be conformed to his world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you prove what is that good and well pleasing and perfect desire of Elohim.
Okay, so it says, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Your mind got to be renewed. That's how you're able to be transformed. There's a close relationship between that spiritual awakening and the renewing of your mind, because your renewed mind is only going to allow you to, your new spirit that you receive is only be able to grow as much as your renewed mind allows it to go. So it's talking about being transformed. You're being transformed really from a spiritual perspective. You're being transformed through a spiritual, from a spiritual perspective, by the renewing of your mind, by the limits, by the lengths that your mind allows you to go. So, in other words, your mind is the thing that's going to hold you back, just like it held back the children of Israel back in the wilderness. And just like it started to even hold back Moses, and just like it started to hold back the people because they had a weak spirit. They had a weak spirit because of what was physically happening to them and their inability to be able to accept what the Most High has said. Right? We're able to see that interconnecting of the mind and what's going on and all of these things. It's a packaged deal. What's Romans 8:6 say? 8. What's that say right there? Romans 8:6.
For the mind of the flesh is death, but the mind of the spirit is life and peace. Because the mind of the flesh is enmity towards Elohim, who does not subject itself to the Torah of Elohim, neither indeed is it able. It says, and those who are in the flesh are unable to please Elohim.
Okay, so when we think about the idea of being in the flesh or having our mind being subject to the flesh, right? Our mind can either be subject to the flesh, what we could physically see, or it could be subject to the spirit. But it says that if our mind is subject to the flesh, then that is enmity towards Elohim. So if our mind is focused on that which is connected to the flesh or carnality, it says that that is enmity towards Elohim. Right? That's the exact opposite of what he would have for us to be doing. Right? Our mind has to be subject to and concentrated on the spirit, because when we doing that, that brings about life and peace. And so we look over here, we seeing all these examples of things that causes us to not be bound up in our minds and to not have our physical reality being the thing that dictates our being, but having the Most High be the one and his words, what he has said, what he has promised. That is the thing that dictates, our being. Okay, so let's go back over here to Exodus real quick. Exodus, back to chapter 6. He said he was going to cause the people to be brought out, to be delivered from their bondage. And then he said that I will redeem you. He said, I will redeem you. And so, again, we talked about the idea of redemption, the fact that Israel was literally owned by Pharaoh and needed to be bought back from Pharaoh. The fact that the Most High, knowing that this was his people, Israel, and that they were in the hands of Pharaoh, that they needed to be returned back to their rightful place, and redemption is the way in which that's done. Now, we saw where he said, you let my firstborn go, or I'm gonna kill your firstborn. That's what he said. And so in that, what we'll end up seeing over there is the payment for Israel, which is the firstborn of Egypt. That's how they paid. They paid by their firstborns being killed. And so when we think about that the idea of redemption, it's about there being a price. It's about there being a payment that's being paid. It's a transference of ownership, which in our case, we go from being owned by our former master, which is our carnal mind, our flesh, our carnal lusts and desires to our master being Yeshua, right? Our Savior, our Passover lamb. When we look at, let's see here. Let's see, 1 Corinthians 7 and 22 and 23.
It says, "For he who is called in the master, while a slave in the master's freed man, you wait. Likewise, who is called while free is a slave of Messiah. You were bought with a price. Do not become slave of men."
Okay, so we see over here where we have the idea of both being free and a slave. Likewise, he who is called while free is a slave of Messiah. So we experience both of these things simultaneously, being free and being a slave. We're being free from what? We're free from sin, but we are a slave to Messiah, right? For he who is called in the master while a slave is the master's freed man. You're free and you a slave at the same time, but not to men, not to men, but to Messiah. In other words, he, Yeshua, is our master. Don't matter what these people sit up here and try to do. The Most High is your Elohim. Yeshua is master. And so we sit up here and we allow these people, men, to dictate what it is we do and say and be and all of these things, right? We done forgot that we've been bought with a price. We got to do what the Most High wants for us to do. That's what we need to be trying to figure out. What is it that he wants for us to do, and how do we get that done? Because we've been bought with a price, right? Yeshua is our master. He's the one in control. He's the one that has paid the price for our freedom, right? And so, you know, our lives are not our own. We have to try to figure out what his plan for our lives is and work according to that. And so again, when we think about the idea of redemption and the price that has been paid, you know, we always think about the fact of being made free by Messiah, but we don't always think about the fact that we have been freed from sin, right? But we are slaves unto righteousness. We look at Psalms, I think it's 119, and let's see here, 134. What's that say right there?
It says, "Redeem me from the oppression of man, that I might guard your orders. Make your face shine upon your servant, and teach me your laws."
Okay, so we see over here, redeem me from the oppression of man, that I might guard your orders. And so when we think about the idea of redemption, redemption brings us these things over here, right? And so once we've done that, once we have this redemption piece out of the way, then now we have this obligation over here that I might guard your orders, your laws, right? And so again, even it goes back to where we even started, the idea of let my people go so that they could worship me in the wilderness. Okay. Okay, so let's just look at this last component, lastly, here, which is the spiritual redemption. He says, I will take you to me. He said, let's see, he said in verse 6, verse 7. Hold on, let me go back. Verse 7, I shall take you as my people. I shall take you as my people. Oh, let me pull that back up. 6, 7. Right? When we look at the components of redemption, it's really just like what he said. I'm going to take you out, and then you're going to worship me. I'm going to free you from those things which are binding you up, and then you're going to worship me. So when we get to verse 7, and shall take you as my people, and I'll be your Elohim. Right? That is that spiritual component of redemption, that spiritual connection that is absolutely necessary. And again, we look back at ancient Israel, they had all four components available because we see that there was, even if it was just the two men, Joshua and Caleb, who had the manifestation of this spiritual redemption. If there was two, we know that it was there, right? And they manifested that ability to be able to transcend their physical reality and have that spiritual strength, from on high to be able to move forward despite what was, what they were actually saying. And so when we think about, for us, when we, the thing that we receive from Yeshua, Yeshua said, who the Son sets free is free indeed. And so when we think about what it is that Yeshua has done for us, making us free, from a spiritual perspective, understanding that, we are perfectly capable and able to be able to manifest Yeshua in our lives, in this world, the way that it is, just even right now. We sit up here and we look at these scriptures, and when we look at the apostles who came after Yeshua, these people, they had the same problems that we had. And then some of them, most of them all end up getting killed by, the authorities for manifesting their truth, which was counterculture for them, right? It was something that the powers that be wasn't trying to hear that stuff they were talking about. And so part of this idea of being transformed by the renewing of our minds is being able to fully be fully persuaded and truly allow the master to be the one that leads and guides us through this life. And the way things are going, it could get to that place where the only answer is death. But the people that we have in the scriptures as examples, it's not as if we're in a position that's worse than what they had. It's the same. It's just, what is it that you are going to stand for in terms of your faith? And so when we think about this idea of being freed, we think about that, thinking about what it is that Yeshua did for each and every one of us. It really calls for us to really look at ourselves and think about the places where we are enslaved still. But it's in our minds though, because he already done freed us, right? But the residual effects is still over there lingering. You just need some more washing by the water of the word in your mind to get you over the top. And it's important for us, especially in these days and these times, to continue to allow the thing that the Most High already has given us. He already gave us all the stuff already. We got it all just sitting here ready, right? In our spiritual things, just locked and loaded, right? But we have to allow for all of the conditioning that has taken place in us for these hundreds of years to be removed by the Spirit of the Most High, right? It's not like there's another thing that got to happen. That other thing is just you being able to trust in the Most High and allow for that Spirit to work and live and grow inside of you, so that you're able to just walk by faith and not by sight. Because what Yeshua did, he already did for you already. It's just about us as individuals being able to accept what he's done and walk it out. Okay, so we got any thoughts or questions or comments about any of those things that we talked about there? Okay, all right. So that being said, that was our Juneteenth edition. Right? We talk about freedom, right? Are you really free? You really free? Because just like everything else, that freedom, it really looks like something, right? You really have to look at your situation and see what it is that's holding you back. There's really nothing holding you back but the fact that your mind needs to be renewed, right? That's how you're transformed. But Yeshua already did the thing, right? And his proclamation is way better than Abraham Lincoln's. You know what I'm saying? Okay, all right. So that being said, we're gonna be done on that note. And y'all willing, next week we shall return with some more. Okay, so we'll say Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.